We got him when he was just a puppy, a mixed breed rescue with soft ears and the kind of eyes that always looked like he was thinking about something. I named him Jasper. From the first night he slept at the foot of my bed, he was more than a pet. He was family. When I moved out to the edge of the woods, Jasper loved it. Wide open space, the kind of silence you don't get in the city, and 1,000 new smells to track. We had a fenced yard, but most nights I'd let him roam a little just before bed. He always came back within 20 minutes, tail wagging, tongue out. Then he started bringing things home. At first, it was harmless, a stick, a bird feather, once even an old tennis ball. Jasper was proud of every find. He'd drop it at my feet like a gift. I'd laugh, toss it aside, and that would be the end of it. But over time, the items changed. No more sticks, no more feathers. Now it was bones. The first one was small, maybe a rabbit, I figured. Clean, dry, not fresh. He dropped it like usual, then sat and stared at me, waiting for something. I shrugged it off and tossed it into the trash. The next night, it happened again, a longer bone, still weathered and dry, but oddly smooth. I checked for any nearby farms or animal traps. Nothing, just forest stretching for miles. Over the next 2 weeks, it became routine. Every night, Jasper would disappear into the trees. Every night, he came back with a bone. Some were tiny, like bird wings. Others weren't. I tried to ignore the unease creeping in. Dogs dig, they chew. Maybe it was just an old deer carcass rotting out there somewhere. Still, I stopped letting him inside right away. I didn't want him dragging whatever he found onto the carpet. One night, he came back late. Nearly an hour had passed, and I was already putting on boots to go look when I saw his silhouette at the edge of the yard. His mouth was clamped tightly around something. I knelt down to take it. It was a bone, like usual, but there was something else, a torn strip of faded fabric tied around it, like a ribbon, or maybe part of a sleeve. I didn't sleep that night. The fabric was stiff, sun-bleached and frayed at the edges. Faded blue, maybe denim. I turned it over in my hands. There was dirt embedded deep in the folds, and something that looked like dried mud, or maybe dried blood. Jasper sat a few feet away, watching me, not panting, just watching. I tossed the bone into the trash again, but this time I double bagged it and pushed it deep under the other garbage. Then I locked the back door. I didn't usually do that. The next day, I couldn't focus at work. I kept thinking about the bone, about the fabric. I Googled images of deer bones, animal bones, human bones. I told myself it was stupid, that I was being paranoid, but the images didn't help. If anything, they made it worse. The bone Jasper brought back the night before had looked a lot like the lower half of a human forearm. That evening, when I got home, I found Jasper already sitting by the back door. His tail wagged slowly when he saw me, but his eyes were locked on the woods, waiting as if he knew he had somewhere to be. I opened the door. He bolted. I didn't follow him. Not yet. I stood at the threshold and stared into the trees. The sky was going dark, and the light from the porch barely reached the edge of the yard. He came back 20 minutes later with another bone, this one longer. Clean, worn smooth. I dropped it the moment I touched it. There was something about the curve, something unmistakably human. I took a photo, uploaded it to a forensic comparison website meant for anthropology students. I didn't expect anything from it, but it made me feel like I was doing something. That night, I dreamed of Jasper digging in the dirt, uncovering dozens of pale bones in neat rows, like a library of the dead. I woke up sweating. By the third week, I stopped pretending it was normal. I started keeping a notebook. Dates, times, descriptions of what Jasper brought home. I even drew sketches. My dog had become something else, a messenger, a collector. I didn't know, but whatever he was doing, he was consistent and always quiet about it. Then came the bone that changed everything. It was wrapped, not just in a strip of fabric, but in a full piece of cloth, a torn square of what looked like flannel, red and black checkered, knotted around one end. Inside the knot was a small metal tag. I untied it. It was an old army dog tag, scratched and worn. The name had mostly rubbed away, but I could make out the letters T, H un, and what looked like part of a serial number. My hands went cold. I spent the next 2 hours searching missing person databases, trying to cross reference military records. There were too many results, too many dead ends. But then I stumbled on a thread in a local forum. A man named Thomas Hunter had gone missing from a nearby town nearly a decade ago, last seen hiking in the very woods behind my house. His photo was low quality, scanned from a printed poster, but he had been wearing a flannel shirt in the picture, red and black. Jasper was curled up on the rug beside me, sleeping like nothing had changed. I sat up the rest of the night, staring at the bones I'd kept in a shoebox under the sink. I hadn't thrown out the last few. I don't know why. Something in me said to hold on to them. The next morning, I called the police. I told them I found something strange in the woods. I didn't mention Jasper. I just gave them coordinates near the edge of the forest, where I thought the bones might have come from. They said they'd send someone to check. No one showed up. A week passed, too. Jasper kept going out, kept coming back with bones. Some were old, some were fresh. One still had scraps of dark hair clinging to it. That was the night I decided to follow him. It was close to 2:15 in the morning when Jasper scratched at the back door. I didn't open it right away. I stood by the window and watched him through the glass. He paced a little, tail still, eyes fixed on the woods. Not once did he look back at the house. When I finally opened the door, he didn't hesitate. He bolted across the yard and disappeared into the trees like he'd been waiting all night. I grabbed my flashlight, a jacket, and slipped on boots. Then I followed him. The cold was deeper in the forest. Every twig underfoot sounded louder than it should have. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dark, but it barely reached more than 10 feet ahead. Still, I could see flashes of Jasper up ahead, his shape weaving between trees like he knew exactly where to go. He never barked, never made a sound. We walked for at least 15 minutes, deeper than I'd ever gone. The terrain started to shift, flatter, softer ground, thick with moss and dead leaves. Then I saw something, an old rusted pickup truck, sunken halfway into the ground. Trees had grown up around it, roots pressing through the cracked windshield. The paint was peeling, the tires gone. It looked like it had been there for decades. Jasper didn't stop. He trotted past it like he'd passed it 100 times. We went deeper. A few minutes later, we reached a clearing. The moonlight spilled in through the canopy, painting the dirt in dull silver. Jasper paused. He sniffed the ground, circled once, then started pawing at a patch of loose earth. I stood still, listening. No wind, no birds, just the sound of claws scraping soil. I stepped closer and shone my light down. The dirt looked recently disturbed. Not fresh, but not settled either, like something had been buried and then unearthed again. I crouched and brushed my hand over the surface. There was something hard underneath. I dug a little more with my hands, pushing aside clumps of damp earth. After just a few inches, I felt it, the curve of a bone. Long, clean, pale, human. I didn't move. I just sat there, hand frozen around the edge of a femur. Jasper whined softly and sat beside me. The ground around us wasn't just a burial spot. It was filled with shallow impressions, scattered and overlapping, dozens of them, some small, others wide. I stood and slowly circled the area. My flashlight passed over more bones, half exposed, some broken, some wrapped in pieces of cloth, string, or leather. Every few feet, something poked from the dirt. A belt buckle, a scrap of denim, a shoe with no laces. This wasn't one body, it was a field. I counted 6 separate mounds before I stopped. There were likely more beyond the tree line. I didn't want to know how many. Jasper paced to the far edge of the clearing and sat, just sat, facing the trees, ears perked, waiting. I scanned the area with my light again, moving slower this time. That's when I saw the tree. It looked like the others until I noticed the markings, deep gouges carved in a grid, like tally marks, dozens of them, slashed into the bark in rows. Above the marks, nailed into the wood, was something small and round. I stepped closer. It was a photograph, a faded Polaroid, water damaged and curling at the corners. A teenage boy standing beside a tent, smiling, holding a fishing rod. Someone had driven a rusted nail through the top of the photo. It was stained with what looked like dried blood. On the back, in fading ink, July 1998, River Loop. I turned away. My hands were shaking. I felt something rising in my throat. Not fear, but a kind of recognition. That spot, River Loop, was a known trail not far from here. I remembered hearing about a missing camper back when I was a kid, just one of many. I looked back at Jasper. He was already walking again. I followed him for another 100 yards. We passed more bones, some untouched, some scattered. At one point, I stepped on something soft, a piece of soaked canvas tarp with a name stitched into the corner, Marla S. Jasper stopped again and began to dig. This time, he didn't uncover a bone, he unearthed something metal, a box, small rusted, like an old lunch pail. I opened it. Inside were 2 items, a cassette tape and a small necklace, silver, with a heart-shaped charm. Inside the charm was a picture of a little girl and a man, father and daughter maybe. Underneath them, folded neatly, was a strip of paper with a short message. Please don't forget me. I couldn't breathe. It was too much. All of it. The bones, the photos, the messages. Someone had buried these people, but they hadn't buried their stories. Not completely. And Jasper had been finding them, one by one. I looked up at the night sky. The trees towered above, silent and still. I wondered how many people had walked these woods and never known what lay beneath their feet. How many had vanished, their names now etched into bark or whispered through the bones Jasper carried home. He looked at me, then turned and started walking back toward the house. I didn't know what to do, but I knew this. My dog wasn't just digging up bones, he was digging up the truth. The next morning, I stayed home from work. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the lunchbox and its contents. The necklace sat between my palms like it was still warm from someone else's hand. I kept replaying the night in my mind, the bones, the tree, the tally marks, the photograph. I hadn't slept. Jasper hadn't either. He lay curled up near the door, silent and alert, ears twitching at every sound, like he expected someone to knock. I thought about calling the police again, but what would I say this time? That my dog had uncovered what looked like a graveyard, that I found a box with a necklace and a message asking to be remembered. I'd already tried going through the proper channels. No one had followed up. No one cared. So I took matters into my own hands. I gathered everything I had, the dog tag, the necklace, the Polaroid, the photos I'd taken of the bones. I printed out screenshots from missing persons databases, circled names that lined up with the small items Jasper had brought home. There were too many to count, each one linked by a thread so thin it only made sense when you stepped back and looked at the whole web. And at the center of that web was him, my dog, a creature that couldn't speak, couldn't explain, but somehow knew where to go, what to find, what to show me. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the woods behind my house, this time in daylight. What I found confirmed everything. About 30 yards past the clearing, hidden beneath a collapsed wooden structure, were more items: a woman's boot, a rusted bicycle, a tangle of cassette tape trailing through the grass like black ribbon, and carved into a plank from the fallen wall, The words, "You won't find me." I called a friend, someone who used to work with the sheriff's department. I asked him to meet me. I told him I needed him to see something. He came an hour later, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. We hiked into the woods, past the clearing, past the truck, past the tree with the tally marks. I showed him the box, the bones, the shallow graves. His face changed. Whatever smile he had brought with him vanished the moment he saw the necklace. He didn't say a word for a long time. Eventually, he muttered something about contacting someone he trusted, not the station, someone higher. I nodded. I didn't care who found out at that point, as long as someone did. That night, I watched Jasper sleep. He didn't dream like he used to. No twitching legs or soft barks, just silence. I wondered how long he had been doing this, how long he had been trying to tell me something. I had ignored him for weeks, treated it like a game, like some strange phase. And all that time, he had been bringing me pieces of people, evidence, messages, remnants of lives cut short and forgotten. The next day, someone knocked on my door, not a local officer, someone in a suit, clean cut, clipboard in hand. He asked questions. I gave vague answers. I showed him the site, the items, the photos. He nodded, took notes, asked to keep the box. I let him. Before he left, he looked down at Jasper, who sat by the steps. Hell of a nose on him, he said. That night, Jasper didn't leave the yard. He sat by the back fence, facing the woods, ears high. I watched from the porch. A breeze picked up around midnight, and I thought for a second I heard footsteps beyond the trees, but they faded quickly. A few days later, a crew came out. Quietly, no news vans, no police tape, just a few unmarked trucks, a couple men in plain clothes, and a few large tarps. They were there all day. By nightfall, they were gone. So was everything else. The graves were filled. The bones were taken. The tally-marked tree had been cut down. I asked around. No one knew anything, or pretended not to. But Jasper remembered. Every night after that, he scratched at the back door at the same time, just like before, 2:15 a.m. on the dot. And each time, he would look at me, not begging, not whining, just waiting. He still wanted to go, so I followed him again. This time, he didn't take me to the clearing. He led me to a small ridge a few miles east. There, tucked between a fallen log and a pile of rocks, he began to dig again. Only this time, there were no bones, no objects, no flannel, no tags. There was a bag, a black garbage bag, partially exposed, the plastic torn in several places. Inside were photos, hundreds of them, crammed together, warped by moisture, but still visible. Faces, smiles, families, children, old birthdays, fishing trips, graduations. Each photo was marked on the back, locations, dates, names. Some of them matched the ones I had circled. Some didn't. I brought them home, laid them out on my living room floor like puzzle pieces. It took me 3 nights to go through all of them. That was when I understood. Jasper hadn't just been finding bones. He'd been finding people who were never meant to be found. After I cataloged all the photographs, I kept them sealed in a large zippered folder beneath my bed. I didn't want anyone stumbling across them. Not friends, not family, not even the man in the suit who took the metal box. Something about it all felt unfinished, like I had interrupted a ritual that had been running quietly for years. Jasper grew restless. He stopped sleeping through the night. He'd pace near the door, sniff the windows, bark at the empty yard. Sometimes he'd let out a low growl at nothing at all, not the playful kind, the kind that starts deep in the chest and rumbles like warning thunder. Something had changed. I noticed it too. The woods felt different now, not just eerie, but watched. Not the way you feel when you think someone might be behind you, the way you feel when you know they are. I started locking all the doors at night, including the one to the basement. I checked the windows twice before going to sleep. Still, Jasper scratched at the door at exactly 2:15 a.m. Eventually, I gave in and followed him again, but this time I was prepared. I brought a larger flashlight, extra batteries, a knife, and a trail marker spray I'd picked up from a hunting store. If we were going deeper, I didn't want to get lost. Jasper led the way, but he moved differently now, slower, more cautious. His ears were high, and he paused every few feet to sniff the air. We didn't take the same route as before. This path curved south, hugging the edge of an old creek that had mostly dried up. The rocks were slick, the ground uneven. About 20 minutes in, Jasper stopped dead. I crouched beside him and turned off the flashlight. We stood in silence, breathing low. Then I heard it, a snap, not close, but not far either. The unmistakable sound of a footstep on dry twigs. Then another, and another. I held my breath. No light, no voices, just that slow, deliberate crunch of someone walking. Not fast, not sneaking, just approaching. Jasper didn't bark. He didn't move. I reached into my pocket for the knife and kept my other hand over the flashlight switch. The footsteps stopped. Then the air shifted. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying with it a sharp metallic smell. Not blood exactly, but something like it. I flicked the light back on and swept the beam across the woods. Nothing, just trees, rocks, leaves, but I felt it. Whoever or whatever had been there was still nearby. We pressed on. Jasper moved again, faster now, as if trying to put distance between us and whatever had been behind us. We reached a narrow path lined with stones, barely wide enough for one person. Along the path were signs, literal signs, rusted metal nailed to trees, some with warnings, some too faded to read. One said, "No camping beyond this point." Another, handwritten on an old board, "Stay out." I hadn't seen these before. Jasper veered off the trail and darted into the brush. I hesitated, then followed. We emerged into a circular clearing surrounded by tall, dead trees. At the center was a small structure, wooden, rotting, roof partially caved in, like an old storage shed or hunting shack. Jasper didn't move toward it. He sat down and stared. The door was slightly open. I raised my flashlight and stepped closer. The wood creaked beneath my feet. Moss covered the lower half of the walls, and the air smelled of mildew and decay. I pushed the door open with the side of my foot. Inside was a chair, metal, rusted. Chains hung from the wall beside it. And on the floor, another photograph. This one was recent, a woman in jogging clothes, mid-stride, smiling for a selfie. On the back, someone had written, August 2022, Fire Trail Loop. I knew that loop. It was just 6 miles from my backyard. Jasper let out a low whimper. Then I heard it again. The footsteps, closer this time. I shut off the light. This time there was no mistaking it. The sound of leaves crunching, a twig snapping, the creak of a branch bending under weight. Someone was walking directly toward the shack. I crouched, holding my breath, eyes wide in the dark. Jasper remained still, but his body was tight, ready to run or fight. The steps stopped just outside. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the presence, heavy, intentional, listening. I waited. A minute passed, then two, silence. Eventually, I turned the light back on. No one. I stepped out of the shack. The woods were empty, but something was different. There was a small item resting on the trail we'd come from. I approached it slowly. It was a bone, wrapped in cloth, not old, fresh. The cloth had a patch sewn onto it, an embroidered name I recognized. It was mine. I didn't touch it. Jasper and I walked home without another sound. I locked every door behind us and pulled the curtains tight. I sat on the couch for hours with the flashlight still in my hand. The woods weren't just haunted by the past. They were inhabited by someone who still walked them, someone who buried secrets, and someone who didn't like being interrupted. The day after I found the bone wrapped in cloth with my name on it. I didn't leave the house. I didn't open the door, didn't turn on the lights, didn't answer my phone. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the floor, waiting for something to happen. Jasper lay by the door like always, but he didn't scratch, not that night. For the first time in weeks, he stayed inside. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I had seen too much, stepped too far into something I was never supposed to find. I told myself it was done, but the next night, at exactly 2:15, Jasper stood up. He went to the door and sat down. He didn't make a sound, just looked at me. I didn't move. The night after that, the same thing, and the next, and the next. For almost a week, I refused. I stayed inside. I ignored the itch in my brain and the tightness in my chest, but Jasper kept sitting at the door, and eventually, curiosity outweighed fear, so I followed him. This time, we didn't go deep, just past the first bend in the trail to a familiar spot near the rusted truck. He stopped beside a mound of dirt that hadn't been there before, freshly turned. No leaves, no cover. I didn't have to dig. The soil crumbled easily under my boots, and within minutes I saw it. Another box. This one was smaller. Inside was a photo of me, taken from behind. I was in my kitchen, standing at the sink. The second item was a key. I didn't recognize it. There was no note, no tag, no explanation, just those two things. I brought them home, locked them in a drawer, and didn't tell anyone. 2 nights later, Jasper brought me another bone. It was blackened at the tip, burned maybe, wrapped in a strip of newspaper from over 20 years ago. A headline barely legible beneath the dirt. Teen girl still missing after local fair. The name was familiar. I looked it up. She had disappeared 4 towns over, never found. The case was cold. Jasper had just reopened it, silently, without needing a single word. At that point, I stopped questioning. Every night, Jasper led me to something new. A scarf, a child's shoe, a Polaroid stuffed into a jar. Once it was a doll's head, with a note pinned to the inside. Don't let him find me. Each item was more disturbing than the last. Each discovery darker, older, heavier, but I kept going, because someone had to. After a month, I started marking the map. Red pins for confirmed victims, blue for items with no known match. The board filled quickly. I ran out of space. I never saw the person in the woods again, but I felt them. Sometimes I'd see footprints that didn't belong to me, or Jasper. Sometimes the trail would have new markings, crosses etched into trees, plastic flags stuck in the dirt. Once, there was a rope tied to a branch with something still dangling from it when I arrived. They knew I was coming, and they didn't care. One night, Jasper led me to the edge of a dried-out ravine. At the bottom, half buried beneath a tire, was a skull. Beside it was a necklace with a name etched into it. A name from the photos. Another confirmation. Another soul finally accounted for. I didn't call the police. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Every time I had reached out, the evidence vanished. The site was cleaned, the trail erased, but the bones kept appearing, the woods kept giving, and Jasper kept going, always at 2:15. Winter came, the ground hardened, snow masked the trails, but Jasper still scratched at the door, still sniffed the air, still waited. I bundled up and followed, step for step. Sometimes we found something, sometimes we didn't, but every night felt like we were walking through the timeline of someone else's nightmare, a long-forgotten sequence of crimes, buried beneath moss and rot and silence. Jasper didn't slow down. If anything, he became more focused, and I became more obsessed. I stopped talking to friends, stopped answering emails. I told work I was taking a leave of absence. The only thing that mattered was following the trail, completing the map, giving names back to the nameless. Eventually, I started to wonder why Jasper had chosen me, why my dog of all animals, of all people, had become the guide to so many lost souls. Maybe he wasn't finding them at all. Maybe they were finding him, and using him to reach me. I'll never know. What I do know is this: Jasper still scratches at the door, every night, same time, and every time I follow him, I find something no one else was ever meant to see. Bones, names, warnings. Sometimes I think we're getting close to the end, but I'm never sure, because just when I think we've found them all, he brings home another one,